My name is Alexis and this is Branches. Welcome. In this vlog, I discuss everything genealogy, and let's get into this week's video. In this video, we will be continuing on with the life of Ebenezer Brown, a Mormon pioneer. And where we left off is he had been jailed with the prophet Joseph Smith. Not exactly sure exactly what day it was, but he was he was released, but the church doesn't have any records of his incarceration or his arrest. Let's get started. During this time in Nauvoo, the spirit of apostasy was rampant. It appears that Ebenezer's mother may have been touched by it, but Ebenezer seems to have risen above it and remained faithful to the gospel and to the prophet. We are left to speculate about his reaction to the death in 1844 of the beloved prophet leader. We do know that on December 24th, 1845, Ebenezer took out his own endowments in the Nauvoo temple, and that in 1846, he and Phoebe were among the refugees who left Nauvoo and headed for a home even farther west. The call for the Mormon battalion came in the summer of 1846 while the Browns were in Iowa. Ebenezer was designated second sergeant of Company A, and Phoebe had the title of laundress. Zamira Palmer, Phoebe's son, went with her. The other children were left behind to make their way west on their own. Harriet, by then 19 and married to Oliver Stratton, took charge of the younger children, among them John, who was 9 years old. John remarks that Father left us in very poor circumstances, having no protection from the storm except our wagons and tents, and only the protecting care of the Almighty from wicked men. The children had a lot of company in their poor circumstances. Most of the other refugees were in similar straits, nor were they the only orphans stranded on the prairie. They made their way west with the saints on the plains, and Ebenezer and Phoebe took up their adventure ordeal with the battalion. The battalion marched out of Council Bluffs on July 20th, 1846. Ebenezer was 44 years old, Phoebe was 48. There's little record of Ebenezer and Phoebe's personal experiences on the march. Some of the hardships that the battalion as a whole suffered we know from other histories. Hunger, thirst, illness, inept doctoring, and inadequate supplies plagued them all the way along. South to Fort Leavenworth they marched, then southwest to Santa Fe, all along suffering from illness due to short rations and lack of good water. The battalion arrived in Santa Fe in October. From there, a sick detachment and the women and children who had accompanied the battalion were sent north to Pueblo for the winter. From Pueblo, they would be able to join the main body of the Mormon pioneers at government expense. The next summer, the rest of the battalion, now traveling without its sick and its women, headed on west. Phoebe must have fared well during the first part of the journey, as she was one of only 4 women permitted to accompany the battalion all the way to the coast. From Santa Fe to Tucson, they blazed a new trail. Water, which had been scarce before, now was non-existent for days. The men and women held pebbles in their mouths to lessen the thirst and tried not to think about it. Oh, can you imagine? From Tucson, the trip, which had been hard at first, became desperately difficult across the desert. The group trekked 75 miles without finding water, boiled rawhide for soup, and walked barefoot across the cactus because their shoes were so poor as to be harder on their feet than the cactus spines. I can't even imagine how hard this must have been. Physically, no. That's insane. At last, on January 29th, 1847, they arrived at their destination, San Diego. They had walked 1,100 miles 2 days later, they had a new destination, San Luis Rey Mission, an additional 3 days march. During the next 6 months, the battalion served at San Diego, San Luis Rey, and the Cajun Pass outside of Los Angeles. It was mustered out of service on July 18, 1847. President Young had advised all battalion members without means to stay in California and earn money for their trip to Salt Lake Valley. As Ebenezer had no money, he was one of 81 officers and men to re-enlist and remain in San Diego. The enlistment expired in March of 1848. Next, he and Phoebe worked a year for wages at Sutter's Mill. They left California late in the summer of 1849 to arrive in the Salt Lake Valley just 1 week after Harriet and their children came in. Ebenezer immediately set out to find a place to settle. As the Salt Lake City area was already distributed among the earlier arrivals, again, John provides us with the story of the search for a home and the beginning of the settlement of Draper, Utah. My father, Ebenezer, and his 3 sons set out to find a new and unclaimed land. Together we discovered unoccupied land and water in a large cove in the southeast corner of the Salt Lake Valley, throughout which the water from 4 springs ran, and began immediately to build a cabin on the ground and to prepare for crops to be planted in the spring. In 1850, Father brought Phoebe and the rest of the family down from Salt Lake City to make a permanent home. Ebenezer must have found the sparsely forested location refreshing to cultivate after the dense forest of the east. Imagine, super forest, and now it's mostly desert. His son, Norman, is credited with plowing Draper's, then South Willow Creek, first furrow. The problems they didn't have in clearing the land and finding water for their pasture and crops were offset by the problems they did have due to the abundant water. The area was so marshy that Ebenezer had to cut willows and lay them crosswise to make a corduroy road across the marshes. Still, it was a good place, and there was space. So Ebenezer's friend and Phoebe's brother, William Draper, joined them there. Soon other Drapers came to settle. The community was growing. Ebenezer had barely begun to get settled in his new home when he was called on a settlement mission to Iron County. On December 7, 1850, he and others under the leadership of Apostle George A. Smith left Salt Lake City. The Iron County Company consisted of a large group, 120 men, 30 women, and 18 children. Most of the group were chosen for their specific talents: farmers, blacksmiths, sawyers, shoemakers, stonemasons, bricklayers, teachers, smelters, doctors, midwives, and many other specialties were asked to go. Iron County was to be set up as a community first, and was then to be established as the source of iron for the Mormon colonies. Alright guys, that's going to be it for the second part of Ebenezer Brown's life story. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't watched the first part to this, you definitely should go and do that. Probably should have done that before you watch this one so you won't be confused. But go ahead and give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.